Hey everyone, welcome back to the Theater Podcast, intimate personal conversations with the industry's biggest names. I'm your host, Alan Seals, and our guest for this episode is Katie Rose Clarke, who just began previews right as this episode drops for Merrily We Roll Along, the much anticipated Sondheim revival. She is from Texas, has an amazing story of finding her love in theater pretty late in her young life, and then going off to college and almost not even graduating before setting the record, which I believe she still holds, for the longest person to play Glinda on Broadway. So lots of great story to share. Find me online, Instagram, Facebook, Threads, TikTok. Please leave a rating and a review wherever you're listening, whatever platform you're using now. And so everybody, please, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Katie Rose Clarke.
Here you go. 1, 2, 3.
Today's guest made her Broadway debut in The Light in the Piazza, holds the record for the longest person to ever play Glinda in Wicked, the musical, originated the role of Helen in George Takei's Allegiance, and brought Ellen to life in the 2017 revival of Miss Saigon, and is involved in the development of The Heart of Rock and Roll, a new musical based on the iconic songbook of Huey Lewis and the News. On TV, you may recognize her from CBS's The Good Wife, alongside Juliana Margulies and Michael J. Fox, and in the digital comedy series Relevant. Starting with previews this September 19th, we're going to see her alongside Jonathan Groff, Daniel Radcliffe, and Lindsay Mendez in Merrily We Roll Along. Katie Rose Clarke, welcome to the Theater Podcast.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
I realized that the wording is like, you hold the record for the longest person to ever play Glinda. It sounds like that's a record for being tall.
Yeah, it really does. I think that's true. I think that has been fact checked. I think it's the longest running or most performances of Glinda on Broadway. I'm thinking it's the longest running Broadway Glinda, but I'm not even sure.
I don't know. I've heard that across a couple different places, which I think is really cool. And do you know Brett Shuford? Did you ever overlap with him?
Yeah. Not in Wicked, but I do know him. Yeah.
Yeah, so Brett, he made a comment to me. He's like, it's hard to leave a show like Wicked because you get that Wicked money, right? It's like, it's a knowing that you have a contract that essentially is open-ended, more or less, right?
Yeah.
Was that, I guess, was that part of the decision to stay? Did you love the show? Like, I guess that's a good place to start for us is when you're doing new work or developing new work or even staying in the work that you've got. What's coming into play about, like, do I renew my contract again, or do I take a chance and try something new? Like, where does that mindset come in?
Yeah, for the principal contracts, there is an end date on our contract, so it is a set term. So I was kind of at the mercy of if they invited me to come back and offered me another contract. So that kind of helped my decisions. But truly, I mean. Goodness, it was a long time to do one role, and a role that is so physically and vocally demanding. I did get quite exhausted of it, in the process of it. And but really, it's such an amazing show. I felt so lucky to do it. I was in my 20s. I was trying to just. It was really the show that I cut my teeth on. I got hired to do Glinda when I was 23, and I just kind of kept doing it. Yeah. So I learned a lot of my skills and sort of how to be a professional doing Glinda and Wicked, which is like a wildly privileged thing. I can't believe that is my story. So yeah, I mean, I get the idea of like, yeah, you want to move on and do other things and be, sort of diversify a little bit artistically and creatively. But I mean, also I felt pretty fulfilled in that show in a lot of ways as well. And then, yeah, it's a great contract financially, and in other ways too. You could really kind of establish yourself.
Yeah, I feel like I've talked to a lot of Glindas and Elphabas, and I feel like it's a club, right? It's not a club. It's more than a club. It's like a sorority. Yeah, I was literally going to say sorority like next, but I think it's sisterhood. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah.
It's I mean, the understanding of having to maintain that level 8 times a week, right? Like these are roles. I mean, everything you've done so far, and even coming into Merrily, like I feel like the expectations around all of this are just huge. But I feel like that's sort of you now, because like you replaced Kelly O'Hara in Light in the Piazza, right? So like replacing someone like Kelly is a lot of pressure, and then stepping into Glinda on the first national tour of Wicked before hitting Broadway, again, pressure, expectations.
Sure, yeah.
Wait. So you said 23, you did Broadway, or was that the first national tour?
First national tour. Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then how long did you do the tour before hitting Broadway?
Just under 2 years. It was like a year, and it ended up being like a year and 10 months altogether. And then I had a couple of months off, and then I joined the Broadway company. And then it's the same. I did it 2 years in the Broadway company, and then they asked me to do a short stint in LA, kind of like an LA short sit down in LA, which actually was the national tour again, but they were sitting down in LA for like, I'm going to say it was like 2 or 3 months. I can't remember. It was a while ago. Yeah. And then I came back to Broadway. I mean, it was just, I was all over, and thank God. I mean, I really, again, like I said, I really cut my teeth on that show.
Was it harder to do the tour or the Broadway run, or did it not make a difference?
I think I was always the role for me was so vocally challenging and physically challenging that I found it just, no matter where I was, I really had to learn how to keep myself healthy and in shape to do the show. And I definitely made every single mistake in that area along the way. But yeah, definitely sitting down in the city is easier. You don't have the added pressure of, picking up and moving and getting used to a new city and getting resettled into a new city every, couple weeks or a month. And honestly, the tour for Wicked was amazing because you sit down in a city for 2 weeks at least, usually. I think there were very few 1 week sit downs for me when I was on the tour. And the tour was relatively new when I joined it back in, 2007.
Is it harder? Some people like this and some people don't, but is it harder for you as you're traveling on the touring side to hit different theaters because there's different, literally just aside from the different dressing rooms and the different sizes of the wings, the stages are different. And like, are set pieces always exactly a certain distance apart when you're touring, or like, is there things that have to cut because of stage size, or do they not even go to certain places because the stage isn't big enough?
Yeah, that's how it was when I was on the tour back then. We had our show was like, it had its own footprint. We just like set it in there. So if theaters couldn't accommodate the size of our footprint, then we couldn't go there. And I think that ended up being why they ended up doing the second national tour, was so that they could accommodate different houses. I think they made adjustments to it so that they could fit in more houses. Interesting. They shortened the name too, which is called Wick. Yeah. Smaller size. They shortened they made it smaller. They shortened the show. It was only 2 hours.
It just went straight to defying gravity, and that was it.
It was a 90-minute, no intermission.
Yeah. Well, then back up then to I guess little Katie Clarke. Where did you grow up? Like, where'd you cut your teeth as a kid?
Yeah, I grew up in Texas, in a town called Friendswood, which is kind of right smack in the middle of Galveston and Houston on the Gulf Coast of Texas. And yeah, that's where I grew up. My family still lives there. My parents still live there. My brother lives there with his family.
There's a lot of people, tons of Broadway people that come from Texas. Why is that? Yeah. What do you think?
Gosh, I mean, it's a big state. I don't know.
I know, but there's other big states, but like Texas specifically produces so many Broadway people.
Yeah. Well, like who else are you thinking of?
I can't. Now you put me on the spot.
No, no. Kevin Cahoon is from Texas, I think.
Well, yeah, and Brett Shuford. Speaking of Brett, is from Texas.
Brett Shuford, of course, and Jeremy Jordan is from Texas.
Yeah, like there's a lot of people who are from regions of Texas. I don't know if like they just need to get out of Texas, and New York's the only place they can get to that makes sense. I don't know, but what was it then about your childhood when you started performing? And were you dancing, singing, acting, all of the above?
I was singing. I took piano lessons all growing up, and I never really got, that wasn't my outlet, and then I started singing. And in high school, I started taking voice lessons with this voice teacher named Lainey Carlin. And it was her who introduced me and my sister, both of us, to musical theater. And gosh, I mean, she would give us her CDs of soundtracks of shows, and I would take it home. And the little booklet that comes inside that you can you can follow along with the lyrics. And there's those tiny pictures in there.
Oh, the liner notes used to have lyrics. I remember the days. Yeah.
Pictures and all the lyrics, and I would just, from beginning to end, listen to the CDs that she would lend me. She would lend them to me and let me keep them for a while, and I would just learn these shows. And that's how I learned Miss Saigon and Secret Garden, Les Mis. I mean, all the great ones from those days. I mean, I fell in love with it. And I just remember, I'll never forget going through Les Mis and reading, and Miss Saigon. I think it's because those are fully sung, so you can kind of really get the full story just from the soundtrack, So whereas it's not just like selections from the show, it's actually the full show. So I just remember sobbing through this cast album of Miss Saigon and Les Mis, these soundtracks. And then, I kind of had and then I started she ran a community theater in my hometown. So I started doing shows at her community theater, and that was all in high school.
Oh, wow. So you didn't even get into it until high school. And was there a concrete turning point you remember where you're like, I guess I want to try doing this as a job? Because until that point, I mean, right now, my kids, times they are changing. My older one, who's just started third grade, is like, I want to be a YouTuber, which didn't exist when we were kids.
Oh, my gosh. Hilarious.
Right. Not for me. I'm like, get a real job. Sorry to all you YouTubers out there. I know it's hard work. But
I mean, it's so different though, isn't it?
Oh, it's so different.
I mean, YouTube wasn't even around really. I mean, when I came into the Broadway community with doing Light in the Piazza, it was 2005. That's when YouTube started. It was brand new. So we didn't know that there would be bootlegs and things out there. I mean, I had no idea. I didn't even know there were online message boards back then, because it was just not part of our awareness back then. We didn't have smartphones really back then.
No, and YouTube, like Google bought YouTube in 2006, I want to say. And that's like when it really, I think, really started to take off, right? Because that's when you had Google money being shoved into it.
Right.
But no, I anyway, so back to the original question, right? Like, do you know what in middle school, do you remember what you were interested in? And then in high school, was there a turning point where you said, I want to do this as a job?
Oh my gosh. I think I didn't really think about that until I went to college, and I auditioned for all the big schools after high school, trying to get into a musical theater program. And I didn't get into any of them. So I kind of, except for the one that was closest to home, which was at Sam Houston State University in Huntsville, Texas. And so I went there, and I actually, had a great time there. I had kind of one experience at school that was a little negative, and at Sam, and I took a break and I stepped away from doing musical theater, and I just stepped away from pursuing my degree in musical theater for a semester. And then I just decided that wasn't it. And I came back to school, and I kind of doubled down on it. And I started auditioning. Anytime I got an opportunity to audition for a professional show in Houston, I would drive down from Huntsville and try to audition. And I ended up getting, I got in the chorus of Anything Goes with Dee Hodey when I was like a junior or senior in college. And I was like, wow, I got a professional acting job. And I was like, maybe I can do this. And I started making a plan of how to save money to go to New York, to move to New York. And, I was going to do this whole, I had worked all through high school and college. So I had saved a bunch of money. I had this whole plan lined up of like how much I wanted to have in my bank account, how much time I would take after school, if mom and dad would let me live at the house and keep working to get to my savings goal before I moved to New York, and all this stuff. And then during that time, I got this opportunity to audition for Piazza, which was also so wild and random. So my mom and I flew up to New York to take this audition, thinking it would just be like a high and by neat opportunity. And then I got a call back for it, and we had to extend our stay. We had to change our flights and get a new hotel. Like, we were not planning to stay, but I got this call back. So we changed our flights and changed our hotel and stayed. And I got it on a Friday afternoon. I found out I got the job to replace Kelly and had to report to rehearsal on Tuesday. So I had the weekend to go home and pack a bag and come back to the city.
I had no idea that you weren't even in New York, like established in New York, living wise at that point.
Yeah, I was not even living in the city yet. I was gearing up to graduate from college.
Wow. So gearing up to graduate. So did you end up graduating? Were you able to graduate?
Yeah, I had to take some of my finals online while I was rehearsing here at Lincoln Center. I got a lot. I mean, I had done a lot of I was in my final days of my final semester. So I really was just having to I started rehearsing in November. I was a December graduate. So I started rehearsing in November of 2005. And then, I was right there. I just had to take a couple of finals and they allowed me to do it online.
That's really fortunate.
Yes.
I mean, that's one of those moments where in a multiverse, one teacher didn't let you do it. And like your whole career is totally different, right? Because it's one of these things, it's a gatekeeping moment that I like to call them, right? Is that you look back and you can trace it back to if this had gone the other way, it's a very simple choice.
Yeah.
Could have changed absolutely everything. I love thinking about that stuff.
Totally. That's such a good point. And there was a teacher, it was one of my science courses that I had to take online. And he was very resilient to the idea of letting me do my final online. And I had this big talk with my parents and they said, if this is the one thing that keeps you from doing this and getting your dream here, then we'll let you just not finish college and we don't have to have a degree. And if that keeps you, maybe you can eventually do an online course and get your degree later.
Wow. Good on them. Yeah. I mean,
super supportive.
That's a big deal. I mean, some people are very, must have degree, must do this. And it sounds like the science, of course, it's a science teacher who didn't support the performing arts.
Yeah.
Nothing against all of you scientists out there, especially if you're a YouTube science lady. So
we're coming for the YouTubers today.
Yeah, dude, coming at you, YouTube. We're gonna take a short break. Stay tuned for more of the episode. Okay, so November, you get it. Your first professional gig. Your first professional gig, living in New York for the first time, learning New York while at Lincoln Center, LCT, one of the best organizations I think in New York for theater. Mm-hmm. And not even finished college, taking your finals. Remember that whole pressure thing we were talking about?
Yeah.
So are you feeling this at that time? I mean, think back to this moment, right? And are you like, oh, this is great, this is normal, I can handle all this? Or are you about to just, fall over from exhaustion?
Yeah, it was the latter. I didn't handle it very well. I felt pretty overwhelmed. And I was young. I had just turned 21. I graduated early too from high school and also college. So I was just young, and I called my mom really just overwhelmed, and she ended up flying up and staying with me for a couple of weeks to help me get settled in. And then it was the holidays, so my family came up and they all stayed with me, and yeah, it was such a wild time. Yeah, I mean, certainly did not handle the pressure of it very well at all. The whole during that season. I mean, gosh, I learned a lot of things the hard way. I made a lot of mistakes and I still do. I mean, I did let the pressure get to me at different times. And I remember one night where my mom had this real heart to heart with me when she was staying here with me, getting me kind of settled in, getting me used to the city and helping me kind of get my footing a little bit. And she was like, I need to know that you can do this without me here. You need to show me that you can handle this. And I think that's what I needed to hear. I just needed that nudge to be like, it's time to grow up a little bit more. And even though it was kind of jarring and I wasn't quite ready, it was kind of out of nowhere that I moved to the city and had to do all these things and had this responsibility and these pressures and with no experience, But I did need her to say, it's time to do this now. You got to step up to the plate now,
That's good that set with you. I think it's very cool. And it's something too that I can tell is going to move into your parenting as well, right? Mm-hmm. Because it made such an impression on you that, I mean, even one little it's not little, but like one seemingly, again, insignificant conversation of just, it's kind of shaped how things have pushed forward. Because if she hadn't have said that, would you have been able to push through it? I love thinking about this stuff.
I'll never forget that night, that comment. And it was so in like classic Alison Clarke fashion, just very subtle without pushing or any real agenda, but just like, here's what it is. And she just let it sit in my brain. And sure enough, it really did. It shaped the way I moved forward as a professional.
Wow. Well, good for her. So 21, you got Piazza. 23, you get Wicked. And then, you said you were doing that for 2 years. So then 25, you're on Broadway as Glinda. Mm-hmm. And yeah, your female voices in general aren't even fully mature until they're like 30 or so, right? And then you develop it and whatnot. So physiologically, you're still developing and you're still finding out who you are as a performer, professional, and with your voice as well. And I guess looking backwards, what's one of the biggest things that you feel you could have done differently? Caveat that, acknowledging that we won't be where we are without the mistakes that we made, right? So we can say, oh, if I'd done this differently, I'd be better, but we don't know that, right? And we're happy and we're here because of the mistakes we made and we learn from them. But can you think back on something around this time, especially mid-20s? I made so many stupid mistakes, especially in my mid-20s.
Me too.
Well, right?
Oh my gosh, cringy. I think back on certain things and I just cringe in my mid-20s. I think I continue this. I continue to struggle with this now, but I think I was really hard on myself. Particularly, you were talking about how the female voice just doesn't quite, when I replaced Kelly, I did not have that sort of higher, more classical sounding soprano in my voice yet. That part of my voice just had not opened up. And I was so, I just felt a lot of pressure to sort of try to force it. And I just did not, it wasn't happening. I ended up going on the tour with Piazza, and it was while I was on tour that I started there was just a change. My voice just physically changed, and I don't have any reason for it. And I was able to sort of make sort of sounds that I hadn't made before in the Broadway production. And, who doesn't want to sound like Kelly on those beautiful soaring notes that she just had how she does it, I don't know. She can straight up sing. So I was like, I had her in my head as like, that is what I need to get to. That's the trajectory. And I wish I had just been easier on myself and just, and who does at 21, just like accept yourself for where you are and give grace for nobody. I don't even do that now at the age I'm at now. But yeah, I think being at peace with where you are and giving yourself grace, that's hard for me now even.
Oh yeah. I'm what year are we in? So I'm about to be 43 next month. Yeah. And I still struggle with that every day.
Oh yeah. Same.
I struggle with that every day of like, well, was I a good parent? Was I a good podcaster? Was I a good New Yorker? Right. Just like legitimately going around and trying to spread kindness forward. This stuff's freaking hard. No, and then to be kind to yourself, I think, is one of the hardest things people could do.
It is. Gosh, and parenting brings that to like a whole new level, doesn't it? Like, yeah, the pressure to do, and I had great parents, and I have so much pressure on myself to just not mess them up, but I'm human, you're not going to do everything perfectly. And, it's just, it brings it all to a whole new level. But I can be very hard on myself.
Yeah. Well, how then is Merrily going along those lines? So like there's so much hype around the show because I think this is the first revival
Mhm.
ever on
Mhm.
Broadway.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it opened November 16th, 1981, directed by Hal Prince. Opened to widely negative reviews and closed after 16 performances and 52 previews, but it's been extensively rewritten. Yes.
Yes.
So, how is that going pressure-wise for you? And I really don't mean to cause like anxiety and make this a whole
Oh
like
gosh.
therapy session. Um,
No, let's do it. I go deep. Let's go deep.
but like there is a lot of attention on the show in a very exciting way, in a very good way, because
Yeah.
people have wanted this for a long time. So like, are you feeling this? Are within the cast, have you guys all like huddled up and, high-fived and elbow bumped and been like, all right, we got this, we can crush it? Like, how's that going internally?
Kind of. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Dan says, I don't have any baggage with this show because I didn't know it before this iteration of it. So I don't know any of that history. And that's not the version I think of. I just think of our version. And I'm actually pretty similar. I didn't know the show really at all. I mean, I knew some of the songs from it, but that was it. So coming into Maria's vision of it was like, wow, this is an amazing piece, and so I only really have that as well. But it is just so fun. And, Lindsay Mendez and I have been friends for, since we were Alphabet and Glinda together on Broadway 3 years ago. We have kids the same age. And so just being in a room with one of my best friends, and I'd known Jonathan since I did Piazza and he was in Spring Awakening. And I mean, it feels like a little work family. So it's just a pretty happy environment. And I don't think anybody really thinks about the pressure that's on it, or at least I don't. I mean, that's not really the energy in the room. I think we're just grateful to be able to do a show and feel and we feel moved by it every time we do it. It's a really tremendous story. And the fact that it works in reverse and you tell the story backwards, that you still leave doing the show with this very hopeful, anything is possible sort of feeling. And it's a real gift of a piece to be able to do. And honestly, I think if you ever get an opportunity to do a Sondheim show, you just leap on it because it's like really, just a treasure. So anyway, I could gush about it on and on, but as far as pressure of making it to be something or righting a past wrong, or trying to fix something that was a flop, I don't know that I in my view, as just Beth in the show, I don't feel that at all.
What's it like? You said that you've known Jonathan, you've known Lindsay for a while, but working with Daniel, working with the rest of the team, all the press, all the promotion that's coming out around it, everyone just seems genuinely happy to be doing this and like real friends.
Yeah.
And you can see it in the eyes of the photographs of the production photos that are coming out.
Yeah.
Everyone seems like really freaking excited just to be doing this and to be happy and hang out with each other. So yeah, you said it's like a work family, but what's it like as a whole? And actually, before you answer that, I want to acknowledge too that you said you guys don't really feel the pressure as a cast, which I think is a testament to the creative team doing a great job of, letting you guys be in a creative, safe space and be able to fully express yourselves without any worry of anything like that. So.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
So what did I just put a pin in? What did I say we'd come back to? I forgot the question I just asked before
how we get along, and it's kind of a happy place. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So is it the rehearsal environment, the exploration of your characters and your relationships what is that like with the established personal relationships you have with the rest of the cast, right? So you're not coming into a room of strangers, you're coming into a room of real friends, and now creating your characters on top of that.
Mm-hmm. I think it's such a luxury that we had the time off Broadway together. So the people that we didn't necessarily know before doing this show together, we got to know. We had the off Broadway run together, and then we've had a few months since then, and now we're coming back together. So it feels like a reunion of sorts, and those of us that have kids, they get excited to see how much they've grown. And, we bring our kids up on dinner breaks and things, and the kids play together and play. And the cast plays with kids, it's just a real treasure of an environment. And, I think that is the starting place, is that we kind of had this time away and now we're coming back together again. And so, but it's also a luxury just in the work. So we can really deepen the groundwork we laid off Broadway now is just the starting point for Broadway. At New York Theater Workshop, that was just the starting point for what we've started in the rehearsal room for Broadway. It's if it could have gotten deeper, it did, which at the time I didn't think it was possible, but it's just more nuanced. It's deeper. It's really thrilling. And we're just kind of mining more out of the material.
Right. Yeah. I love the idea of, being able to really stand it on its feet. You work it, it goes off Broadway, and then it's working so well there, but then you get to even fine tune it that much more. It's the same concept behind doing out of town tryouts. But I love the shows that come from the New York Theater Workshop, especially because New York audiences are unlike any other, and they're critical unlike any other. And so I think you can fine tune it. You get a magnifying glass. You get to explore the things that can be improved in a way when you're doing the out of town here in New York.
Yeah.
You get to improve it in a way that is different. So I'm really excited. I'm very excited for that. You first got involved with the workshop last year. So we're in 23 now. That was 22. So did all of this come onto your plate post pandemic or during the pandemic? And what was that like, I guess, without the work at that time?
Yeah, post-pandemic. It was my first show post-pandemic and post having all my kids. And so actually Lindsay was living in LA at the time, and she and I would we're still old ladies that use Marco Polo. I know that's not what the kids use anymore, but we would send Marco Polo, because she was LA and I was New York. So we would send Marco Polos of, just updates, almost every day, of our kids and just what was going on in our lives. And she was sharing with me about Merrily, and I was like, this is going to be your job, Lindsay. This is the perfect role for you. And the more she talked about it, I got so excited for her. And then I was like, I want to be in that show. I was hugely pregnant with my third baby at the time. And I emailed my manager and my agent, and I said, I don't know if which part could maybe be for me. There's 2 other female roles. And I was like, but I want to be seen for one of them if possible. So sure enough, they got on the horn, and I got an audition, and I went in 9 months pregnant and did my audition for the team. And I had my callback, at the end of that week. And then 2 days after my callback, I had my daughter, my third baby. I was actually in labor. So I wasn't supposed to go into labor with my third baby. They wanted me to go to the hospital before I went into labor for just a few different reasons. So my husband and I, the night before my callback, we were timing contractions to make sure we didn't need to go to the hospital. So wild. Yeah. So I was in these auditions just fully having contractions and hoping I didn't go into labor right there. But
holy cow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Oh geez. Yeah. The Braxton Hicks are no joke. That's rough.
Yeah.
But I wonder if anybody out there is listening and knows of anybody whose water broke during an audition or a callback. I'd love to know about it.
I would love to know about that.
I'd love to hear that story. We're going to take a short break. Stay tuned for more of the episode.
I was definitely in early stages. It was definitely I had to keep an eye when my contractions were really consistent. We were really having to watch them. I don't know if any of your listeners know anything about labor or birth, but
I do.
You do. So that's all that matters. Yeah, we were definitely keeping an eye on it. It was a wild thing. Wild. And then I had my daughter, and I kind of thought that it just went away. It didn't go my way. But 2 months later, they wanted me to come in and do a read with Jonathan, the chemistry read. And Jim Carnahan, the casting director, comes into the waiting room and he gets me and he's like, "You look different." And he's like, "You've got to bring pictures of the baby in with you for this. Everybody's going to want to see him." So I brought in pictures of my little, my kids and my brand new, my Mabel, my daughter.
Aww.
She was 2 months old when I had my chemistry read, and then we found out at the end of the week that I got it. And then 2 months after that, I started rehearsals. It was wild.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
That is very, very cool. And then, are you still involved with developing the Heart of Rock and Roll, with the Huey Lewis and the News musical, or is that on the back burner now, or is that on the side? Like, how do you have time to be a mom of 3 and develop a new musical and rehearse for Merrily and you've just got everything going on?
It seems like that, probably from the outside. Heart of Rock and Roll, I just did a developmental workshop of it right before we started rehearsals for Merrily. It was over the summer we did, and I'm kind of waiting to hear when they're moving forward. And I do believe they are moving forward, but I don't have enough information yet. But yes, if they ask me to move forward with them, I absolutely will. That team is awesome. And I've been with the show from the very first table read. I created the character alongside them. And by the end of the process, the last workshop we did, this last developmental thing, I just really felt just like a collaborator with the team. And Gordon Greenberg is the director, and he's so dear and he's such a good friend and he's so funny that we would just, talk about ideas together. And that's a real special thing as an actor, to have that kind of rapport with the creative team. And I felt really lucky to be a part of that and to have that with them. But I haven't heard what their timing is and if it will line up with, my Merrily dates. So I'm just kind of waiting and hoping.
Gordon, I've known Gordon for a while. We did Dracula, Comedy of Terrors, which is about to open in New World Stages, right?
Yes.
But we have it on Broadway Podcast Network here. We have it as an audio drama that we created at the beginning of the pandemic. So it's same script. It's probably been modified, since then. But
wow.
Love Gordon. Such a great guy. Gordon and Steve Rosen. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, they're hilarious. Some of the funniest people I know. I mean, really.
Yeah. Absolutely. I was going to ask you about I was just going to say Huey Lewis is all on my mind now because, Back to the Future, he's all involved with Back to the Future as well. But did you get to work, or have you worked with Huey as part of the process, or is he involved or not?
Yeah, he's very involved. Yeah, he's really hands-on and really is such a champion of it. He loves musical theater. He did Chicago on Broadway.
Oh, yeah.
He was Billy Flynn.
Yes, I remember now. I remember.
Yeah. So anyway, he loves musicals. He loves Heart of Rock and Roll. He loves the show. He's a real champion of it. And he's it is wild. It's a very pinch me moment. Like, he just comes in the room and, he's just, hugging everybody, and he's great. So yeah, he's definitely involved.
I believe it was Huey Lewis. Now as I'm about to say it, I'm second guessing myself, but wasn't he the father on One Tree Hill like 20 years ago? He played he played one of the dads of the main characters. Anyway, I think it was him because I had a scene with him as an extra on One Tree Hill. Oh,
okay. I'm going to have to look it up. I don't know. Yeah. I never watched it.
Neither did I. Okay.
We'll get to it.
I'm in there somewhere. I've been in like 2 different scenes. Yeah, they filmed at North Carolina, where I'm from, and Screen Gem Studios, or I guess what was Screen Gem Studios in North Carolina there. Yeah. So that it was Dawson's Creek was replaced by One Tree Hill. So yeah, if you're a New York actor, you have to be something on Law and Order to as a rite of passage, you have to do the same. The Screen Gem Studios TV shows were the same North Carolina version of that.
Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. Okay, well now I'm gonna have to go look it up.
Yeah, I did one scene with Sophia. What's her name? I can't even get this is how little I remember at this point. Anyway, it's been so long. Okay. 3 closing questions that I use to end every episode here. Just the very first one is what motivates you?
Oh my gosh. I think, my kids now. Yeah.
That's
I
interesting. So
it
go ahead. Go ahead.
it's hard. I mean, it's hard to I go because as an actor, we're in and out of work, and when we're in work, it's kind of intense, and then when we're not, I'm just a full-time stay-at-home mom, and that can be feel like whiplash going between the two.
So hard.
Yeah. But I think it's so worth it when they can come up and kind of get context for where I go every day and what I do. And it's something that their little brains can understand. I just kind of go and play pretend for a living, and sing songs, and they know Aunt Lindsay, and, so they come up to work, and and Eleanor is at an age where she really gets excited about it.
Oh, Eleanor Mabel, you said was your youngest one?
Yeah, Eleanor, Jack,
Mabel.
and then Mabel. Mm-hmm.
I love those names. Those beautiful names. Yeah, speaking of YouTube, this hasn't happened yet because I don't think any of your kids are old enough, I suspect. But mine are, going to second, third grade now, and they know how to put my name into YouTube, and so stuff gets returned, and they're like, "Daddy, you're famous. You're in YouTube."
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, no. That's not how YouTube works. I am not famous. So one of these days, you got to expectation set with the kids, right? Of just saying you might find me on the internet and it doesn't mean anything. It's just, it's funny the way that they perceive things. So we're trying to get perspective.
That is so wild. Okay. Yeah. I'll be, cautiously waiting for that moment.
One day they're going to Google you and be like, oh, mommy's on the internet. Oh, cool. Yeah. Okay. Next question then. What advice would you give to your younger self? We sort of covered this earlier, but what advice would you give to your younger self and younger people listening now, starting out down a similar path?
Oh gosh, that I echo exactly what we said earlier. Just be gentle with yourself and trust that you're enough, and don't try to push yourself beyond just exactly where you are and who you are.
Beautiful. Okay. Hardest question now. If you could only see one show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
Oh my gosh, I could never answer this question. What's your answer?
Rent.
Oh, good one.
Because that was my touchstone. That's the show I saw where I was like, oh, musical theater is for me. Because I'm not a Piazza voice. I'm not a Les Mis voice. That's the style that spoke to me.
You're a Rent voice. I gotcha.
Yeah.
Probably then that's making me think of what mine was, which it was all the soundtracks of Miss Saigon and Les Mis, but actually in college, it was Thoroughly Modern Millie.
Nice.
And Sutton Foster.
I was about to say, have you gotten to work with Sutton?
No, I would shrivel up into a ball of tears and cry in the corner because I'd be so starstruck. I mean, I've met her in passing kind of, but she's one that I just, would be not, I would have zero chill.
That's funny because you're literally on stage, with Harry Potter, and Sutton Foster is the one that's going to make you shrivel into a ball and cry.
I know. I didn't really watch Harry Potter, which Dan knows that now. I've told him many times I'm very unfamiliar with his body of work. I didn't see him in How to Succeed. I didn't know anything that he's really done. So, I mean, joking, of course. I know he's a huge celebrity, international celebrity, but
nothing like knocking him down a peg to really, really make a good bond.
It came up because we were playing a game between shows off Broadway. We were playing. Do you know what Fishbowl is? It's kind of like Celebrity, where you.
Yeah.
So we were doing that, and as a cast, we would do that between shows off Broadway. Dan and I were on the same team, and I was going through, and you have to go through. If you don't know something, you get one pass. And I saw this thing, and I was like, I have no idea what this is. So I put it aside, and then at the end, and so it was my one pass. And at the end, you kind of tally up the ones that your team guessed correctly. And Dan was going through them and looking at them, and he was like, oh, such and such. I still don't remember what it was, but he's like, oh, such and such. And I was like, yeah, sorry, I don't know what that is. He's like, it's a character from Potter. And I was like, okay, sorry. So this is the moment where I tell you that I didn't see any of your films. Sorry. I thought we would get through this whole contract together without me having to tell you that. And it was just a really funny moment. So now it's kind of he knows I haven't seen him.
Well, if he was Paul Rudd's character in Only Murders in the Building, then he would have a party where you have to watch all of his films back to back, right? Because you have to stroke his ego. But he doesn't seem like that kind of guy.
Was that in Only Murders? Are you an episode ahead of me?
No. I'm just saying that Paul Rudd's character is so egotistical that if he found out that somebody had not watched his films, like Cobro,
totally,
then he'd be like, all right, we got to sit down and watch this. We're watching this until you understand me.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that is the polar opposite of how Dan is. He's probably just the most humble person on the planet, as famous as he is. But
that's super cool.
I did read some of the books, the Harry Potter books, and I know what my house is. Back when I was reading, I read the first 3 books, and I'm a Hufflepuff. You are a Hufflepuff. I can see that. Yeah.
I read all the books. I used to live in Washington Heights, so I would have, before early cell phone days when, you still didn't have signal in the stations. Remember those days, kids?
Oh, sure.
There was no signal downstairs. I read all the books on my commutes to and from work. My early days in New York. Yeah,
did you watch the movies as you read the books? That's what I was doing. So I saw the first 3 movies. That's a lot.
There you go. We saw Little Dan. Anyway, so where can we find you online? Well, on all the social medias?
I'm not really. I'm on Instagram. That's about it.
Not a bad thing.
Yeah, I never got on Facebook or anything, but yeah, come on over to Instagram. I'm on there.
Well, I've given up on X. I'm over on Threads. Again, everybody, catch Katie in Merrily We Roll Along, starting preview September 19th. If you are listening to this podcast, which obviously you are, leave a rating and review wherever you are listening. Jukebox the Ghost gave us our intro, outro music, and Katie Rose Clarke gave us our amazing conversation. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.